Okay, so the functions of our nervous system are things that everyone already knows. We're just putting it in more sciencey terms here. Alright, so what does our nervous system do? It takes in information and causes our body to respond in order to survive. There you go, nervous system, done. So, more science terms for it is we are monitoring changes occurring inside and outside of the body. Those changes are referred to as stimuli, which is the plural of stimulus. And then our body's going to respond in different ways in order to make sure we survive. So our body will decide if we need to move or if we need to activate a gland in our body, those kind of things, based on outside forces and internal forces. We have what's referred to as a motor output, which means that the response to that stimuli activates a muscle for movement or causes glands to start producing different hormones or different chemicals. Motor means movement. So motor output means that that stimuli caused a movement. We have two divisions of our nervous system. We have the central nervous system, or CNS, and so think center. Okay, this is found in the center of our body. So this is our brain and our spinal cord, central nervous system. Peripheral, think about, it means to the side. Okay, so these are all the nerves that are branching off from our spinal cord, branching off from our brain. So that's peripheral nervous system, or PNS. And both of those together make up our nervous system. With that, we have two divisions, or think of those as pathways that the input can take. So we have the sensory pathway, or sensory division. This is known as afferent or afferent. They are going to be carrying information, or the stimuli, from the peripheral nervous system to the central nervous system, mainly dealing with our senses. That's why it's called the sensory division. So if I go and poke myself with a paper clip, that sensory reception is going from peripheral nervous system and traveling up to the central nervous system here. So, sensory division goes peripheral to central. The other pathway we can take is the motor input. This is known as efferent or efferent, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And this goes the opposite way. It starts off in our central nervous system, but it's sending impulses to the peripheral nervous system in order to produce movement. So that's why it's known as motor division, or the motor pathway. So sensory pathway is peripheral to central. Motor pathway, central to peripheral. It causes a movement. So if we recall from the muscular system, we don't just have skeletal muscles that are voluntary. We also have our involuntary muscle movements, and involuntary muscles like our cardiac muscle and our smooth muscle. The motor division deals with all of those muscles, so skeletal, cardiac, and smooth. It's also going to deal with some glands in our body. So in that motor pathway, you have two little branching off points, two divisions. The voluntary is known as somatic nervous system, and just to let you know, I will refer to these as voluntary and involuntary. But the technical term is somatic for voluntary. Autonomic, think auto, automatically. So we do it without thinking. So autonomic is involuntary. So voluntary deals with skeletal muscles, involuntary deals with cardiac and smooth. So again, one pathway is sensory, which means it starts peripheral and goes to central. Our motor pathway starts at central, goes to peripheral. It can either do the voluntary subdivision, which deals with movement of skeletal muscles, or it can deal with the involuntary pathway, which deals with our cardiac, smooth, and different glands, so our involuntary movement. I do love me some flowcharts. I will tell you, that is, anytime I see a flowchart, it makes me happy. I just really like how they look. So this goes through the two divisions, or two pathways. So in blue is our sensory pathway. We have our sense organ. So again, let's say it is one of our touch receptors on my finger here. And so I poke it. Ow. It moves along the path, peripheral, and it ends up in the central. All right, that response where I'm like, ow, I need to stop doing that, is something from the central nervous system. The motor division or pathway is in red here. So it starts central nervous system, and it could be that, this hurts, so my brain is going to tell me, you need to move that hand away. And so the response where I touch and go, ow, is part of the motor division. So central nervous system to peripheral. It can either be voluntary, so affecting the skeletal muscles, or it can be involuntary, affecting the cardiac, smooth, and our glands. I'm not going to talk about sympathetic and parasympathetic, so please do not worry about that. All right, real quick, I'm going to go over the nerve cells. I know this might go a little bit out extra with class, so I just want, before I get to that, I just want to let you know that all right, so we have a lot of different nerve cells in our body. These ones here I'm going to talk about today are the support cells, which are referred to as neuroglia. The first type is our astrocytes. So cytes, that end word there, is our suffix, or our, that root there means cell. Astro means star. These are star-shaped cells. Now I look at this picture, I'm like, who decided that was a star, first of all? Because I have some questions. But they are referred to as astrocytes. They are extremely abundant, and what happens is they are controlling the chemical environment of the brain and providing a barrier between our neurons, which are the main nerve cells, and capillaries, which are these tubes that go through the body that carry blood and other chemicals. So they act as a barrier. They're controlling the chemical environment of the brain. The next one we have is our microglia. These are supposed to look like spiders, and sure, why not? Again, I question some of the decisions early anatomy people made. Their purpose, they're phagocytes. So if you remember from the immune system, phago means to eat. So they are going to eat waste products and debris in order to get rid of it. The next cell is our ependymal cells. They are going to line the cavities of the brain and the spinal column. Now, our brain and our spinal cord are not just sitting there chilling. Okay, they're not just suspended in the air inside of our vertebrae, inside of our skull. They're actually surrounded by fluid. It's referred to as cerebro, head, spinal, spine, cerebrospinal fluid. This acts as protection so that, every time you hit your head with something, please don't do that, but hit your head, you don't get a concussion. So the job of the ependymal cells is to move that or circulate it. So zooming in here, we can see these hair-like projections, these cilia, that are used to just move things along. For the central nervous system, these cells here, oligodendrocytes, are going to produce myelin sheaths around nerve fibers. Now, you can pick up any electronic cord, and you're not seeing the wires because there's protective wrapping around it. That is what the myelin sheath does to our nerve fibers. So these cells here deal with the central nervous system, whereas our Schwann cells do that function for the peripheral nervous system. And Schwann, I believe, is named after Theodor Schwann, who was a microbiologist that did some important work with cell theory. And then finally we have our satellite cells. They're going to be sort of a little protection for the cell bodies of our main nerve cells. All right, so those are the notes for today. I'm going to stop recording.